What's up guys, Single Player Nacho here, and today we're rating Resident Evil 4 monsters and creatures. Resident Evil 4 is notorious for switching out regular zombies for carefully disguised foul-mouthed Spanish villagers. There's also a great amount of variety in enemies, and since it is a long game, the more the better. With basically 3 different themes throughout, village, castle, island, the character designers must have felt pure excitement at throwing out ideas for grotesque creatures. Here's how the tiers work. S tier for amazing designs, relevancy, and backstory. These monsters offer a very thrilling boss fight, or they're just awesome as shit, and scary. A tier is for well-designed monsters, B for nothing special, just all around decent, C for meh, and the dreaded D tier for lazy design, boring, and strenuous boss fights. So let's start with cultist monks, which belong at the B tier. Yeah, sure, they're just bald pale dudes in robes, but you have to admit there's a big mystery as to why they're so brainless and mundane. Cult members are always interesting. They also have some pretty sweet medieval weapons, so B tier. Next up is Jack Krauser, which shares the B tier. Now, I might get some flack for this because Krauser is pretty awesome and has some shady past beef with Leon, but there's just too much I'm a macho guy that makes sounds like huh, guh, and heh. He's a very 80s action flick villain, but he does get points for that sick hand sword thing he gets while transforming. It looks like something out of Soul Calibur. Alright, the U3 is a disgusting, genuinely gut-wrenching blob of horror, and it belongs in the A tier, easily. I'll never forget my first encounter with this thing. I was hiding behind my controller, and I couldn't even make out what the hell I was looking at. And that tongue, A tier. Well, here's some drama. I'm putting the Garrador at S tier. Why? Because they're not only awesome and fun to mess with, there's this increased level of detail behind their design that isn't thoroughly explained through words, but the audience can take a closer look at the shut eyelids, metal braces, tall figure. I mean, it's the amazingly small details that put El Garrador at S tier. Next up is the Plaga, and I'm grouping up the 3 variations of them and putting these bad boys at the C tier. Overall, yes, the tentacles and pulsating heads are a nice touch, and there's 3 different types of them, but they're incredibly weak and easy to kill. We have that awesome intro and you think, ah shit, these are gonna be a pain in the ass. And no, flash grenade. El Gigante is an A tier for me personally, and I doubt these giants belong in A tier for many of you because yes, it's this slow, bulky creature, but in my opinion, just the perspective of the boss fight where you can really only see its legs half the time is pretty intimidating. It's also pretty cool. It easily has one of the coolest intros where El Gigante destroys a dozen villagers. They also provide a fun boss battle with different mechanics, so A tier, for me anyway. Speeding through, Armadura goes to the C tier because they're just plagas with armor. Chainsaw Guy, S tier, easy. There's nothing more visually representative for Resident Evil 4 than the Chainsaw Guy. I mean, they're not only super awesome, the image of the chainsaw almost summarizes the divide between classic Resident Evil and Resident Evil 4. Things are different now. Zombie with the chainsaw, pure awesomeness, S tier. The Novisadors go to B tier for that cool acid death animation. Verdugo goes to, you guessed it, S tier. Outside of the most heart-racing boss fight possibly of the entire game, the hooded design is so mysterious. There's this huge level of intrigue for what these things are at first glance. I love how they appear just like, yeah, we're not only the bodyguards, we're monsters that walk normally and follow commands. So awesome, and the design is just, wow, S tier. We're starting D tier selections, and who's the lucky winner? Gatling gun guy. I mean, I couldn't think of a lazier design than the giant dude with the giant gun, and a beret to top it off. Following the Gatling gun guy at D tier are the island soldiers for being the bad apple of regular enemies. It's really hard to understand what the designers were going for when it comes to dressing up these twerps. Next up is Ramon Salazar, and I'm putting our favorite 80-year-old looking 20-year-old at C tier. Don't get me wrong, I'll give props to Capcom for giving this Napoleon figure a decent chunk of screen time in the game. Sometimes his dialogue works, but sometimes Ramon's actions just come off as silly. Probably the worst aging boss character, no pun intended. Stay in 2004, Ramon.
How dare you! No more games! Kill him!
Colmillos go to the C tier for being passable zombie dogs. I'm putting Sadler, the main baddie of the game, at B tier because as the big bad, I would have expected a little bit more. At the end of the day, Sadler's voice acting is S tier. Design, choices, and dialogue is what keeps him at B tier. Next, the Iron Maiden are extremely terrifying A tier creatures. I'm not sure how you guys will react to this, but I'm putting Del Lago at the D tier. Ouch. I'm all for putting giant lake monsters in a horror game. It isn't done enough. but the boss fight just isn't thrilling at all. Lots of button mashing, the spear throwing isn't responsive, and I know it's all a fantasy, but the actual logic behind a gargantuan lake monster not killing Leon in one fell swoop takes me out of it. D tier. Los Ganados are easily A tier. There's something about the villagers' interactions and hilarious voice lines that give Resident Evil 4 that sweet Capcom charm. It makes the player not feel forced to take the game seriously. The lore behind these guys is pretty tragic too, so definitely A tier. The Bell sisters, although a cool afterthought, really get overshadowed by the main chainsaw dude and belong at the upper C tier, lower B tier. They're definitely cool though. Just the fact that this guy is known as the Big Cheese puts them at A tier. That is all. Video over. No, but really, there's just no other character design that would set the tone for boss fights in this game than Taurus Mendez. Just this huge, somewhat quiet but intimidating bearded man that turns into easily one of my favorite monster designs. I just can't forget the sound of his footsteps as he approaches the player. Super scary. And last but certainly not least, we all know where the Regenerator goes. S tier. I can't even stress how amazing the design of this monster is because it literally disturbs all of the 5 senses. I mean, sure, you can't taste it or smell it or feel it, but would you? Absolutely horrendous in every aspect. These things were in my nightmares for sure. S tier. And that's my complete ranking of most, if not all, Resident Evil 4 monsters. I don't think I missed any important ones. Do you agree? Let me know in the comments below. I'll post a link in the description so you can make your own RE4 monsters tier list, and don't be shy, share them in the comments. If you guys like Resident Evil content, subscribe to this channel, but if you're into spooky gaming mysteries, check out my newly launched channel, link will be in the description, and any support is much appreciated. Thanks so much for watching, and as always, stay single.